you mangy dogs. Swab the decks and hoist the sails. The guns on board be needing some proper manning. Pieces of 8 and a fine wench on your arm. If you work, be not too shoddy. Careful not to flounder too badly, though, or you may have to dance the hempen jig as we see you to Davy Jones. Jeffy, my boy, on with the show.
Welcome everybody, friends, folks, foes, and fellow pirate mateys, to our latest edition, feature edition of Pirate Radio Podcast. It's episode number 337. A special Manhattan double feature. Maybe a little comedy thrown into the mix. Who knows? Anything could be pretty much on the table, up for grabs. I myself, of course, as always, your host, trusty sidekick and commentator, the Robin Hood's very own Jaffe Ryder. So, reminding you that WPRPN.com is the website. You'll want to drop by, take a look at, sign up as free. All you simply need is a username, password, and email. If you do run into any problems along the way, do not hesitate in getting back to us via our main email address, pirate1radio@protonmail.com. That's pirate, the numeral 1 radio@protonmail.com. We'll take whatever steps are necessary to help smooth things over, get you sailing off in just the sort of direction you hope to be. Be sure as well to check out the show description, links, a lot of great items you'll find there worked into the mix. We have a Patreon, presents, and merchandise, which is, great to know about, obviously, if you'd like to help us out, even, with PayPal, pirate1radio@protonmail.com, that handy-dandy, really important email address with half of everything that we managed to generate on whatever front and through whatever means. 50% goes directly back to the grassroots, very much in conjunction with the whole hashtag WWRHD, what would Robin Hood do, spirit and ethos. So, feeling a little under the weather here myself at present, a combination of what I can only imagine is something along the lines of a 24-hour flu, meeting up with a sudden case of food poisoning, if you can believe that. So, a bit of a bummer. But I tell you, when as soon as I heard our guests' voices coming through, connecting with us here to Korea via Manhattan, New York, USA, it gave me an immediate shot of energy and adrenaline, so I knew that we could get this done. So speaking of whom, this kicking things off in the first hour, civilian intelligence analyst and host of the Morningstar Report, Robert Morningstar, will offer his predictions for Trump 2.0. Will we more or less witness a repeat of his first term, or will there be any major game-changing surprises? In the second hour, Jill Anon will guide us through the life of a largely forgotten historical figure, former governor of New York and actually two-time is what she told us most recently, Vice President of the United States, Daniel Tompkins. Freemasonry, the War of 1812, New York history, and the abolition movement will all take center stage. And just this last year, I guess, was the 250th year anniversary tribute to Mr. Tompkins, someone I'd never heard of until it was brought to my attention via this dynamic Manhattan duo. So, Robert, I guess you're up first. Is this Tompkins' character? Was he someone that I guess you knew about him because of your geographical vicinity? Is that right?
Well, I've known the name practically all my life because of Tompkins Square Park. And, every once in a while over the years, I would say, who was Tompkins? But it was last year that Jill went to visit St. Mark's Church and then heard his story. And we picked it up and started relating to people how important this man was. He's actually the archetypal American. He was born on June 21st of 1774, 2 years before the actual revolution broke out. And he turned 7 years old when we adopted the Constitution. So, the term All-American, Daniel D. Tompkins was a real All-American, old-style American. And he contributed a lot. I think if it had not been for Daniel D. Tompkins, Britain might have won the War of 1812 because he financed it himself. He paid for the troops. He paid for their training. He took out loans. It's a long story, long saga, well worth hearing. And Jill Anon loves to tell that story. We admire this man very much. He's become so important in our American history over the last couple of months that it's mind-boggling that almost no one knows about him. He established the town of Tompkinsville. I'll tell you what blew my mind. He established the Staten Island Ferry. If anybody listening, when you come to New York, you be sure to go down to South Ferry, Battery Park, and jump on the ferry that crosses New York Bay to Staten Island. That's the fifth borough that almost no one speaks about. But it's a very large borough. It's an island all unto itself, like Manhattan. The other borough, well, we are all islands, except for the Bronx. The Bronx is the only borough that's on the mainland. Manhattan is an island. Staten Island is an island, and Brooklyn and Queens lie situated on Long Island. So you might think of us as an archipelago. But anyway, it's an incredible story of a great man, and much to be admired and remembered. So looking forward to hearing that. We're on Rumble. We did a 22-minute polished interview of the second the lecture that we gave, and we're going to keep developing it. This man's story needs to be told. So now I know. I knew about Tompkins Square Park early in my life, and it was in the East Village, far from my West Side neighborhood. But then when I started to go around in my teenage years and my college years, Tompkins Square Park was the site of the best players in New York City used to congregate to play chess in Tompkins Square Park. And that's how I became more aware of it and visited it to play chess with some of the best in New York. So God bless Daniel D. Tompkins. More aware of it. And my subject for tonight is to play chess with some of the best in New York. We turn the course of history. November 5th, 2024. I think it's going to be remembered in history like we remember July 4th, 1776. It was the expression of an American Revolution and a turnabout. The ship of state was on the wrong course, and on the wrong, like the locomotive, American industry was on the wrong track of history. I've used that term for a long time. And I feel that November 5th was the day that the ship of state got righted. We got a course correction, and that we're heading in the right direction now. This came to me many years ago. In 1990, I was in Switzerland. I flew the Swiss Alps. I flew around the Matterhorn, and the night before I was planning my flight, very excited to do it. I wanted to do it all my life. get in a small plane and fly through Swiss valleys of the Matterhorn and fly around it. And I had a dream that I had an encounter with the angel of history. And he showed me how my people, as he referred to him, to you, to world society, your people have placed you on the wrong track of history. You are leading mankind to a dead end. You must go back and tell your people they have to get back on the right track of history. So that was 1990, and unforgettable experience, and it kind of drove my life for the last 35 years, 1990 to 2025. And I feel that we succeeded in turning the ship of state onto the right course. So to give you an idea of what happened and how huge this is, before I go on, I spoke to Jaffe before the show began and expressed the significance. There's something very puzzling about the elections this year. Britain had an election for prime minister, and they chose July 4th, 2024 for that election. Of course, that's Independence Day in the United States. And we, just by chance, it's designated by the Constitution when election day is, first Tuesday in November, and it turned out to be November 5th. And of course, as I know history and study history, I said, wow, November 5th, that's Guy Fawkes Day. And symbolically, that's the day Guy Fawkes planned to blow up the Parliament. And we said, man, this is fate. Donald Trump is going to blow up the Parliament. He's going to blow up the U.S. Senate. He's going to blow up the Parliament. He's going to turn the world topsy-turvy and get it back on its feet instead of on its head.
Let's hope he doesn't have to blow up the Middle East any more than Netanyahu already has.
That's right. Well, the good news is that they've achieved a peace agreement, a ceasefire, and Joe Biden is trying to take the credit for it, but even the reporters weren't buying that. So they said, Mr. President, didn't President Trump have more to do with this? And he turned around and he said, what, is that a joke? Well, it's no joke. And now it's coming out from Israeli negotiators and ministers that Trump was in touch with Netanyahu, and he put the screws to him, the thumb screws, and made him relent, because Biden had 15 months to put an end to it and to put the pressure on Netanyahu to stop it, stop the slaughter. I don't think that President Trump wants to have that stain on his conscience and that stain on his reputation. So he worked really hard to bring this about before he gets into office. He says he wants to pay attention to national affairs, and he doesn't want this issue to be in the forefront, so he wanted to resolve it. And remember, during the campaign, he said, I'm going to stop the war in Ukraine, and I'm going to stop the war in the Middle East before I am president. Yeah. And it looks like he's wielding power very effectively. So, as I mentioned to Jaffe, I saw an oration, a speech by a man named Peter Bet-David, and I wanted to play this talk that he gives about the significance of this election and what it means for America and for Barack Obama. So if I can share the screen, I'll play about 10 minutes of this to give you an idea of the significance of this event. Okay? Okay, I'm going to share screen right now. And there's this documentary is going out as Candace Owen exposes who Barack Obama really is. And maybe, we might take a break and come back and listen to the rest of it. But for me, the important part is this speech by this fellow. He's going to reiterate it. He starts with his talk about what it signifies to the Democratic Party and to the world what has happened November 5th. So here we go.
But November 5th, listen to me, folks. was the worst day ever for one person. You know who that one person was? Barack Obama. Not Kamala, Barack Obama. Kamala's not a top 20 player on the Democratic Party. Let me say it one more time.
So the Democratic Party over the past few years, frankly, has become overconfident. We've had this wave of diversity, equity, and inclusion shoved down our throats as a mandatory requirement, in addition to peculiar ideologies pertaining to climate alarmism. And quite frankly, the Democratic Party have faced Judgment Day. This is a moment of reckoning. I've mentioned in the past, unless the Democratic Party, you can see this very clearly from the data, unless the Democratic Party moves away from this obsession with which can only be described as woke liberalism, the Democrats shall not win anytime soon. People are done. They are over it entirely. And I think you see this massive transition occur. You see shifts of this occurring in Europe as we speak, with so-called populist figures gaining popularity around the globe. And quite frankly, I'll mention just after we watch this debate and discussion that we are entering and shifted into a new mode of politics which is significantly distinct from what we've just been into. This woke liberalistic idea is ending, it's over, and I think we're marking a new shift into politics. Now, one figure, of course, who represents this old form of politics best is Barack Obama, the man that incepted a wave of identity politics and continually played into stoking racial tensions at every single turn and possibility when you could have quashed or eased or calmed the tensions in some capacity, but rather restoked it. And so Barack Obama exemplifies this identity politicization and this movement towards woke liberalism. Listen to what Patrick Bet-David said in this recent discussion, who the real loser was in this past election.
November 5th may have been a great day for many of you, conservatives and Republicans. It may have been a great day for President Donald Trump. It may have been a great day with the Avengers that they put together, himself, Bobby Kennedy, that came out in Arizona also at one of the Turning Point USA events. You got Elon Musk. You got Tulsi Gabbard. You got the entire team, Laura Trump, who did a phenomenal job behind closed doors, Vivek, all of these folks. But November 5th, listen to me, folks, was the worst day ever for one person. You know who that one person was? Barack Obama. Not Kamala, Barack Obama. Kamala's not a top 20 player on the Democratic Party. Let me say it one more time. She is not a top 20 player. Barack Obama was number one. Go back and think about his track record. Winning. 2004. You know, it doesn't matter if you're black or white or if you're Hispanic or you're this or you're that. This is about America. This is about unification. Boom! Wins, books, making money, on top of the world, two-term president, face of the Democratic Party, goes to all these Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon shows. Everybody loves him. George Clooney, celebrities, he's a rock star. He's the black Jesus for the Democratic Party. This was the worst day of his life, November 5th. Here's why, though. Let me tell you why. Look, how many guys used to play basketball or baseball or some kind of sports? How many guys were really good? Raise your hand if you were really good. How many guys think you were really good, but you actually played college sports? Raise your hand if you played college. So these guys were really good. Raise your hand if you played college sports. Okay. Anybody here ever played professional, like somebody paid you to play? Not illegally back in the days in college, but okay, some of you guys got paid. Do you know what happens when you used to be great in sports and people used to come and watch you? And then 5 years go by, 20 years go by, and now you play, your kids don't even want to watch you. You're no longer interested when you play basketball, right? This happens to us with looks. This happens to us with fame, when we had a great show. This happens to us with a lot of different things. No one's interested in what he has to say anymore. So then you fast forward and you say, okay, Pat, where are you going with this? This is the part. Hear me out. Because today, Trump, Musk, team, J.D. Vance, which, by the way, I got to tell you guys up front, I was not a J.D. guy up front. I thought J.D. did an incredible job the last 4 or 5 months. I thought he played a phenomenal role the last few months, and I'm just being upfront with you. I don't know this guy. I was watching some of the old clips, but now when you watch him, the debate, the way he handled it, when Waltz talked about what happened to his family, you saw the gentle side of him of saying, I'm so sorry your family has to go through this. It was a very unique way when we saw this. So why am I presenting this thing to you here the way that I am? See, for us at Valuetainment, we're going on a 40-year run.
So the real loser of this election, as Patrick says there, is Barack Obama. He has constantly been on this winning streak and was the face of the Democratic Party. But his predictions, some of the things in which he said throughout this past election have just turned out to be utterly atrocious. For instance, comments that Barack made pertaining to those that supported Trump supposedly necessarily being racists. And people, frankly, are just not buying this division anymore. And you can see this massively shift in the demographic data insofar as class matters far more than race or ethnicity. Once again, showcasing the shift away from woke liberalism and frankly, identity politics towards a more based, normal, rational form of politics that I think marked the period before. And so if you're a working class Latino man and you're working hard, trying to provide for your family, woke liberalism is just so unappealing to you. The Democratic Party have lost touch with their voter base. Why would a working class Latino man who would traditionally vote Democrat care at all for the obsession with minority demographics, for instance? There is no desire, there is no reason to care for these demographic groups. That's just frank and logical. And so the Democratic Party lost touch with their voter base, and instead the Republicans peeled away many of these demographics. Now, this is also Candace Owens in a recent debate discussing Barack Obama, the Obama family generally, and how Barack has frankly lost his influence entirely.
Well, I was also going to say that the celebrity endorsements, I think, are now hurting. I have to say, this was the first year
where I was like, they're not working. They're not working. They're hurting now. And you saw this because towards the end, they just ran out it was like every celebrity got the call in the last 4 days. But it was really interesting to just be in the comment section of LeBron James, you know, when he is basically supposed to be the king and black men are supposed to just listen to whatever he says. I mean, I am telling you, the comments under his post were 80% negative. I think there's something about it that feels very patronizing, you know, that they're obviously rolling out these people like LeBron James, even Barack Obama. Barack Obama, I genuinely think him coming out and rolling up his sleeves and talking to the brothers wasn't a good thing. I think the brothers got a little upset by that. It's like, first off, Barry, where have you been? Secondly, when have you ever been a brother? When have you ever been in any sorts of situations that would make you relate to black Americans? You grew up in Singapore and Hawaii, and you went to wealthy schools your entire life. It's an act. His name is Barry Soetoro, and watching him suddenly patronize black men and pretend like he's been a part of some struggle, I genuinely think they just got pissed off. I think they really went, okay, it's just too obvious right now.
Candace, are you trying to say that Cardi B's endorsement of Kamala did nothing to sway your vote? I know you and Cardi.
Or Megan Thee Stallion.
I mean, come on.
I gotta say, when Sexy Red came out and put her butt cheeks in the air, I was almost compelled. I was like slightly...
I've mentioned this many times in the past, but in 2016, it was very, very easy to assert that Trump's election was some sort of one-off. It was this aberration. Trump was running against a weak opponent. The opponent didn't take him very seriously, and in any case, Trump didn't even win the popular vote. And so a lot of people speculated that this was a one-off fluke. It was a strange thing that happened in American history. And this is why also we got much this speculation from the intelligence communities, especially, who asserted that the sole reason as to why Trump was elected was predicated upon mis/disinformation, which turned out to be entirely false. And so when Biden won the White House 4 years later, it seemed as if everything had snapped back into normalcy. after what many deem to be a disastrous, a one-term presidency for Mr. Trump. But following Trump's recent election, and this is a really important point, that marks the shift away from this prime mode of politics in which we've been in, the real anomaly was Biden's election. The real anomaly was Biden, and with Trump inaugurating now a new era of US politics, and perhaps even for the world as a whole, in which I think is frankly happening. This time round, Americans have voted with full knowledge as to who Trump is and what they wanted, and what he frankly represented. And so that is the real shift that I think the conventional political establishment frankly just cannot hold. The fact that this is a major transition away from this old mode of politics, and they voted for this candidate in which is supposedly anomalous in some capacity. He definitely does not fit the traditional characteristics of a politician. But frankly, this is marking a new mode of politics, and you're seeing these shifts and these transitions and this rise of so-called populism, which isn't a negative term, by the way, around the world, mirroring what Trump firstly represented. Let's get to this next clip. This is Patrick Bet-David continuing in this debate, discussing the Democrats and why they lost. They won far too much, he argues. And frankly, as I mentioned, they lost touch with their voter base.
Think about what happens when you win. This is very important for all of us to be aware of this. What happens when you win? How do you walk when you win? Paul, how do you walk when you lose? How do you walk when you lose? Okay, but let me ask you a question. Well, watch this here. Watch this here. It's very important. I've run an insurance agency for 20-something years, and I watch my guys, after an award ceremony, they would come up and say the guy wins the MVP. And he'd come up, yeah, and we beat you guys, and we did this, and we did that, and we did this. And I would always go back. The winner, almost always, their level of paranoia drops a little bit. Arrogance goes up. Speed slows down because you won. Anything, you're always going to win. You know what's the best case study of this? What the Democrats did the last 4 years. They won. And during COVID, they embarrassed everybody. They forced veterans to take a vaccine they didn't want to take. They forced veterans to get out. They forced people to do things that made no sense. My son, I'll never forget, one day we're sitting down. He's 8 years old. We're in Dallas. Jennifer says, babe, you got to come talk to Tico. What's up? He misses his friends. He wants to go to school. I said, babe, I'm going to be his teacher. He's going to come to the office every day. We had one of our best 90 days together during COVID when he was at the office, reading books, all the stuff that we were doing. I was his teacher while I'm running the company. But watch this. When that happened, the Democrats got so arrogant, thinking they're going to own it for 20 years. And they started bullying. And they forgot about the message of America, the greatest country in the world. How this guy from Iran who lived there for 11 years would watch Rocky IV over and over and over and over and over and over again, because the dream was to one day come to this country. We left Iran 6 weeks after Khomeini died. We go to Germany. I live at a refugee camp for a year and a half. Then I come here November 28, 1990. I cannot believe I'm in America. This is almost like I have to pinch myself. We're in America. I'm walking around the airport looking for Sylvester Stallone. Where's Rocky? Where's Gremlins? Where is this Gremlin? Are they going to pop up? Where are all these? Where's Ghostbusters? And we're looking for all these guys, because America to me is movies. But they got arrogant. And they moved like they're going to control you forever. Abusive policies, the LGBTQ agenda, the woke policies. And by the way, Peter Thiel said it best when he was on a podcast with Barry Weiss. He said, you realize when Musk got up and he says, this is the most monumental election of all time. Peter Thiel, who's a billionaire, very important guy behind closed doors. Peter Thiel says, Elon, every election people say it's very monumental. Why? What do you mean this is monumental? He says he eventually got to a point to say, now I fully believe this is a monumental election. He says, why? He says, this is the reason why. You have no idea what just happened 6 weeks ago, folks. This is so important for America. Let me explain to you. He says, if Kamala would have won for the next 20 years, all these 20,000 kids, the next Charlie Kirks, that are inspired to become the next Trumps, guess what they're going to say? That was luck. It only happened one time. It was lucky when he won in 2016. Pure luck. That wasn't what America really wanted. What America really wants is more progressive policies. What America really wants is more control. What America really wants is more, entitlement programs. That's what America really wants. And it's like, no, we don't want that. I mean, there's never been a time where you've converted more Democrats to Republicans than 2024. You say you need a Rogan, you had a Rogan. You see me, you need an Elon Musk, you had an Elon Musk. You say you need a Kennedy, he was yours. Tulsi was yours. You had everybody, but you pushed them out. You were so arrogant and entitled, and that's a turn off.
Peter Thiel put out over the past few days, before we get to this next clip, a very interesting piece in the Financial Times, in which I believe it was titled "The Time for Truth and Reconciliation." And Peter argued, the tech billionaire in Silicon Valley, that basically this old mode of the nation state has effectively collapsed, and we're now ushering into this new era in which necessitates truth and reconciliation. Peter has also said in the past, something in which I agree with, that the reason as to why identity politics doesn't work anymore is primarily technological, actually. It's the fact that we can disseminate and share information at such a degree by which we can expose and see the fallacies, the corruption, the hypocrisy of various politicians. For instance, when Kamala Harris is pulling out various accents, depending upon which audience she's speaking to, we can see this in ways that were previously perhaps less applicable or less apparent. And that is in large part due to the technological revolutions which have taken place over the past decade or so. And so Thiel mentions that based upon the new technological changes that are occurring, based upon this new wave of politics that has been ushered in by Trump, Peter Thiel believes that we need a time for truth and reconciliation. That is to say, to look upon the price scandals and lies, and frankly, to come to the truth and to have some period by which we can examine in a transparent way what actually happened. One evident example of this is the pandemic and the response to the pandemic policy-wise, including figures like Dr. Fauci. And there is a necessity, according to Peter, to interrogate as to the actual cause of the pandemic. And unless we do not have this period of truth and reconciliation, this period of transparency, Peter does not believe that trust can be regained in any capacity in light of the mass distrust that is so apparent throughout society today. So I do think it's a necessity to regain the trust between the people and the government, and perhaps ease this undercurrent of distrust and skepticism in some capacity. There is a necessity for the Trump administration, which they seem to be doing, to at least to some degree facilitate the transparent flow of information when it comes to the pandemic, when it comes to various other conflicts around the world, in which many speculate have primarily been caused or incepted by the United States government. This is David, the next clip, in which he discusses the Republican plan for the next few years and why he believes the Republicans may have a 20-year run ahead of them in light of the quality candidates that are apparent. Listen to this.
We have a lead now, but it's not that big of a lead to get arrogant. I think if we take the lead, this could be a 20-year run we go on. And when I mean 20-year run, this is what I mean by it. Think about the bench that we have right now. Trump right now is the president. President-elect, soon to be president. And we all have to stay paranoid till January 20th to see what happens. All these drones we're seeing all over the place. We have to be very paranoid, skeptical, and not believe anything until we kind of size everybody up to see what's going on over here. And I'm glad the fact that he's making a decision to not go visit Bedminster right now. I think the people that are around him need to be overly protective and make sure that that decision-making is processed the right way until he is in. Once we're in, then we can kind of play a little bit more offense. But from there on, think about what happens now. J.D. Vance proved he can debate. J.D. Vance proved he can sit up against anybody in media and shut them down. Vivek proved he's not afraid of anybody. He's formidable, brilliant. He can go up against anybody, right? Laura Trump, my opinion, Some are not going to like this, but it is what it is. I believe Eric and Laura Trump may be the #1 couple, power couple in the Republican side. Eric and Laura. Eric, formidable. Laura, what she did with the 2,000 lawyers, unbelievable, right? They're at the top as well. The bench that we have, Don Jr. behind closed doors. Don Jr. has played such an important role of getting people to like him. Getting people to like him. A lot of decisions were made behind closed doors because people went through Don. So, hey, I go through Don. Don was the filtering process. Don built the relationship. This is a good guy. And then the introductions made. Don played a very important role. Then they got Charlie Kirk. He's only 31 years old. The bench is deep, which means this bench could go for 20 years. But my ideal situation would be for us to all focus on baptizing. Disrespect less. Disrespect less.
And so for the future, I can only say that it's looking extraordinarily optimistic. And my hope is that the rest of the world mirrors this new sphere of politics that has been ushered in, and what can solely be described as a period of future American exceptionalism. It's certainly very exciting.
Well, there you have it. I feel the same way, that there's a great amount of hope. The whole world seems to be responding. A couple of bullet points. None of the leadership of Germany is coming to the president's inauguration. Merkel is not coming, and Scholz is not coming. They haven't been invited. But who has been invited is the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, Alternative for Germany party, which the media wants to label right-wing, Nazi, extremists, but it's not. It's actually MAGA for Germany. Make America, make Germany great again. Stand up for your own culture, stand up for your own people. And those are the trucks moving past 92nd Street here in Manhattan. The sounds of New York City news. Life goes on, you know. The food you have on your breakfast table is being delivered by this guy that's driving by at 12:15 in the evening. America's back on track. America's back on its feet. We're inspiring, pardon the royal we, we're inspiring the whole world. President Trump has made some really amazing proposals. I predicted a month ago that Justin Trudeau would be deposed without a shot being fired, figuratively speaking. I predicted that Trudeau would be disposed of through comedy, humor, ridicule, sarcasm, and it has come to be. And now the great exposure, the great expose of Justin Trudeau has begun. Yesterday, I received a video of Pierre Poilievre exposing the infiltration of Canada's most sensitive BSL-4, Biosafety Lab 4. That's the highest level of biosafety, where Canada was conducting its own experiments in biological warfare, to be quite frank with you. Gain of function research is just another word for advancing biological warfare. Well, my friend Andrew Curry, my co-host back in 2020, he and I found out that there were hundreds of Chinese troops were seen marching through the back roads of Prince Rupert Island. And we started investigating this. Where were these Chinese soldiers, men and women, in camouflage uniforms? Where were they coming from? Why were they marching around Canada? We found out that the cover story was that a certain organization was giving military training to Chinese executives. Chinese corporate executives in Canada were going to these training sessions where they would train in military fashion, wear uniforms, have a military training regimen, and to make them better corporate executives. We're looking for this thing here. So online, I'm looking for more photographs of Prince Rupert Island, and I typed in something like Chinese operations in Canada, and all of a sudden I got this report about the Winnipeg BSL-4 laboratory, as I said, the highest level biosafety lab in all of Canada, where gain-of-function research was being conducted. And I found that 8 Chinese or virology students and their 2 professors, Chinese professors, had been sacked. They'd been fired. They'd been expelled. Their keys and their access to the laboratories were removed from them, and the Chinese students were deported. The 2 professors were able to stay a little bit longer. But it turns out now that what we uncovered was the infiltration of the Chinese into Canada's most advanced biological warfare laboratory, and that these people that were exposed as students and professors were actually officers, high-ranking officers in the People's Liberation Army. And that came to me yesterday. Perhaps later on in the program we can cue it up and have a little news for Canadians that you're not going to see on the CBC. So let me turn now to Jaffe, Captain Sinclair.
Yeah, I'm here. Just barely, but a few comments coming our way via the chat end of things, courtesy of Sonia Galactic, Joshua Allen Huckle, and Roger Hansen. So Sonia is she's here with bells on via both YouTube and DLive. That's good to see her holding things down via those.
Hi, Sonia.
Yeah, those 2 live stream platforms.
Just friended me on Facebook. Hi, Sonia.
Okay.
Thanks for the friendship on Facebook.
Good stuff.
And Roger, good to know you're there.
Hey, you know what's interesting? Speaking of Sonia, if you have any merchandise that you'd like to launch, you could maybe come up with some ideas and strike a deal with her. She'd be able to promote some of your Morningstar products. She has the greatest design concepts, that she's able to come up with, and it's really, really high quality stuff. So
I'll think about it. I'm getting ready this year. I'm turning my attention, to self-development. Of all the last decades, I've been concerned with righting the ship of state, getting our true history out, catching the men who killed John F. Kennedy, which we have done successfully, and exposing the enemy within. That's the other thing I'm very proud of, that President Trump started using those terms, including a couple of nicknames that I've coined for the governor of California and the future, the governor of the 51st state.
Queen Justine. Gruesome Newsom. Queen Justine.
Gruesome Newsom. So anyway, things are going in the right direction as I speak, as I see it. And this tragedy in California is something that's also putting the spotlight on the ineptitude, the incompetence of the Democrats. They are all smoke and mirrors. It's just using the same tactics of public deception that we've been seeing since 1939, first exemplified, demonstrated by the Wizard of Oz. And I was told many years ago by a very great professor, an eminent professor at the University of Hartford, who was my mentor. I said to him, George Michael, these people seem to be playing Wizard of Oz. It's just like the Munchkins in Oz. And he said, Robert, you don't know how much truth you're saying. They got the idea. He said they had the idea since 1939 to operate this way, but they had to wait until 1963 for the instrument they needed to pull it off, to be placed in every home in America, or a majority of homes, and that is television. Once television was deployed, I'm going to use that word, in the military sense. Once television was deployed throughout the United States, and I think 20 million homes had televisions in 1963, everyone was pulled by the JFK assassination. Our attention was hijacked, and our consciousness was hijacked along with our attention. And then we were just fed lies after lie after lie to keep up this public deception, which is modeled on the Wizard of Oz. So one of my quips is that, folks, if you believe that Lee Harvey Oswald shot President Kennedy, then you're no better off than a bunch of munchkins in Oz. And the munchkins, remember the munchkins awoke when the Wicked Witch could go now with Anon and talk about our new great American hero.
We kicked off a little, got things rolling a little late. Just bullet point form and fashion, I guess, with Trump in particular, and where's he going to be taking policy over the course of his term, in particular regarding JFK transparency, the ufology, the disclosure of UFO truth, as it were, and things like the WHO, for example. Will that have a significant impact? The withdrawal from the WHO.
Going to bail out as fast as he gets. He said it. He's not going for it. He bailed out the last time. He cut the funding. He's going to do it again here. The world is turning in a new direction. Your country and your nation first. And he encourages, he goes to other countries. He says, I expect you to work to make your country great again. I expect you to fight to win for your country, and that's the way it should be in all our countries. So I think this internationalism, the globalism, is collapsing, and the evidence is all around the world. The AfD is advancing in Germany, and they may win the next election. And then, of course, the party of Marine Le Pen in France.
Right.
So that's also surging. People are tired. They are offering free airline tickets home to migrants in Europe, and a lot of them, there's a new term in our vocabulary, self-deportation. So apparently this has begun. Self-deportation has begun in the United States because people who are wrongfully here know that President Trump is serious about getting this immigration situation under control. We have been infiltrated. We've been infiltrated by jihadis. We've been infiltrated by Pan-African Islamists, and we've been infiltrated by thousands and thousands of Chinese.
Yeah, even your military. Look at that recent attack in New Orleans. That was a U.S. military veteran, was it not?
Yes, and the guy who blew up the bomb in Las Vegas was also a military veteran, and both of them served at the same fort.
There is some aspersion, I believe is the word. People not overly sold on the idea that the fellow who parked himself outside the Trump Tower location in Las Vegas, actually that it was who were led to believe it was, that there could have been a body, like they could have killed someone beforehand, put him in the vehicle. These are self-driving.
They can drive them by remote control. And the guy's cell phone was shut off after the explosion. It was changed. The password was changed on the guy's cell phone.
Oh.
After he was supposedly dead. And the DNA of the body does not match the DNA of the man's purported son.
Incredible. Didn't know that. How about that?
Yeah, that's it. He has a son. And they compared the DNA of the body that they found in the burned out, exploded car.
Wow. Well,
and it doesn't match his son.
Uh-huh.
So you put two and two together, it sounds like a really big, successful so far PSYOP.
Yeah.
We're talking about a false flag operation for a long time. Everybody's been anticipating it. And I'm praying that nothing happens between now and Tuesday, but we're going to have to see. We all have to be on guard. If you see something, say something is an old phrase. So
what do you think as far as the JFK and UFO disclosure then, and Trump's what action will be taken? Yeah, they're both
tied together. See, they're inextricably tied together. JFK was killed because he was going to reveal the truth about UFOs, and now after what Trump has seen them do using lawfare against him and demonstrating the absolute corruption of the Department of Justice and the FBI, I think there's going to be a huge house cleaning. I think he's rightfully on the warpath, and there are a lot of people with trembling knees in Washington, not the least of which is Adam Schiff, who was... he had a huge debate with Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi is the nominee for Attorney General. She is the former Attorney General of Florida, and she is really a tremendous, charismatic firebrand, a no-nonsense lady, and an excellent lawyer. And she had a debate with Adam Schiff. He was trying to torpedo her nomination. And it was like a fencing match, and she came out on top. Maybe we can locate that one and play it later in the program. So, yeah, I feel good about it. And also, the world is going to change, folks. We know now who the enemy within is. We know now who they have been working for. They have been working for the Chinese. Gavin Newsom, Joe Biden, that's the Chinese name I gave him. They have been puppets. The Democrat Party betrayed the United States, sold out to the Chinese, military. And now Trump has seen through it, and he's correcting all of these defects.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. So buckle up, folks. As speaking of Chinese, as it's long been said, via their cultures and customs, the jewel of Asian wisdom, may you live in interesting times. Both, I'm not sure if it's said to be either a blessing or a curse, maybe a little of both, really. But that's where we currently find it.
You create interesting times.
Come again?
I said, may you create interesting times. May you live in interesting times, but it's also we have the ability to turn them into interesting times. And I made up my mind years ago. I've always been kind of a news addict. And then I decided at a certain point in my career that instead of watching news, I would be making news. So that's my philosophy now.
There you go. That's right. That's, I think, what we're all doing.
Do something, say something, discover something, share it with the world. We are the ones that made this thing happen. A friend of mine said he doesn't like the word alternate media because it kind of demeans us. It makes us a little less than we really are. We have created a totally new communications network on this planet through the internet. And we overwhelmed the legacy media, or the mockingbird media, as I prefer to call them. We overwhelmed them. We beat CNN. We beat MSNBC. The president of MSNBC has just resigned. She's been there for 11 years. Another diversity hire, pushing the woke agenda. Don Lemon? Where's Don Lemon? Oh, he's on his own podcast because he got fired by CNN. CNN is cleaning house. They have conservative voices there. MSNBC is crashing. Rachel Maddow had to take a $5 million cut in salary. They went from about 1,800,000 viewers in the days before the election. She had 1,800,000 viewers. The day after the election, 800,000 viewers. Can you imagine losing 1 million viewers overnight? because people saw the sham.
They were lying again, basically.
Absolutely, and now it's self-evident.
And look at the pollsters as well. Look at the pollsters did the same thing as 2016. Total manipulation to trying to hoodwink the American voter and the wider world.
Well, our historian has arrived.
Okay, let's do it then. Yeah.
So I'd like to introduce my friend and partner in intrigues and investigations here. I would not be where I am today were it not for Jill Anon and her mother, who got me to go to a lecture in 1992 by the screenwriter of the movie JFK. I just happened to say, hey, Robert, you were very interested in the JFK and the movie. The screenwriter, Zachary Sklar, is going to speak at Martin Luther King High School. Maybe you should go. That changed my life. It actually changed my life completely and put me on this course where I can say I did solve, I and a team of U.S. Marines and hundreds of other researchers, we solved the mysteries of the JFK assassination, and we put our history back in order. We have put our history back on the right track of history. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jill Anon.
Good stuff. Thank you, Robert.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Of course, as always, we will be adding his Substack link to the archived end of what we have to offer via Rumble, Odyssey, and BitChute. Welcome, Jill Anon. We can't quite see you on camera yet. Were you planning on appearing? There you go. Hi there. Are you going to take a seat?
I think I'll stand.
Okay. Whatever you're most comfortable with.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeffy.
So, Daniel Tompkins, the one-time governor of New York and two-time vice president. The second time around, I guess he felt that he was more at that point and probably would have been remembered more down through history if he had have managed to at least ran for president. So
yeah, well, it's a long story, and you're so right, because actually his term as governor was very, very long. It was 10 years. 10 years. So he was governor of New York for 10 consecutive years.
That's a lot.
But, and he is the only person in the 1800s who was the vice president for 2 terms.
Huh.
So, but there's much more to the story, so we can go into that now. But I just.
Oh, how did you first become interested in I guess your natural history? I'm not sure your degree. You have a bachelor's in natural history, is that right?
Yes, I have a degree in more like along the lines of biology and naturalist studies,
right.
Nature studies.
Yeah.
And and I've also been grown up in New York City, and I guess there are certain places which have many layers of history to them, and New York City is one of them.
Yeah, and you well, here's the thing, and you reading your biography just yesterday, you worked as a assistant to the elderly for close to 30 years, and then so you can just imagine the stories you would have heard from them, and that would have any curious person, it would have piqued their interest. They would have wanted to maybe investigate a little further and talk to others. But then the real icing on the cake, I thought, was you actually in some capacity you helped to contribute to various archaeological projects, city-based archaeological digs and archiving projects. Let's hear a little bit more about that, if you would.
Oh, yes. That was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I did it for 4 years. I volunteered at the South Street Seaport Museum, and I was very honored to. There was a wonderfully bright and pioneering woman in charge of the archaeological division at that time. She did it for many years, and she was one of the first people to celebrate archaeology in urban areas, because many times we think of archaeology that we have to go to Egypt, or we have to go to, a very special location to dig and find treasures, But her name is Diana Wall, and she was one of the people that really contributed to this idea of urban archaeology. So at that time, they passed a law that when they were going to erect a tall building, they had to provide time for archaeological excavation to occur before building a very tall building where it would be very unlikely to have that opportunity again to dig beneath it. So there were several buildings that this occurred, and we would receive packages, boxes, cardboard boxes of materials that had been unearthed from underneath as the buildings were being built and the foundations were being excavated. So I got to handle, real pottery and other items, a lot of pottery and clay pipes from the Dutch period.
Yeah, were they smoking weed back in those days?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think they were, they even found Shakespeare smoked a little bit of weed, believe it or not. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, of course, they all did. But the history books, they really did a major whitewash of that and the whole role of hemp in American, Canadian, and broader world history. But anyways, moving along, sorry to jump in there. I just had to. Couldn't restrain myself.
Sure. The Dutch were known for these clay pipes, a special clay pipe. And we found quite a few of those, and all kinds of remarkable items that were, of course, made from real materials, as they could have only been made at that time. And it was quite an experience. We did do an exhibit called Beneath the City Streets, and of course, I also learned how to help put things together for the curate or the conservator to glue. But we did the first stages of it. We took notes on the artifacts for labeling and packing them and so forth. So it was just a very, very good experience.
Okay, well that's I mean, I love watching archaeology documentaries, actually, and these digs that are often showcased and profiled. I don't know if you or Robert as a team have spent any time looking at those yourself, but if you get a chance, or if any of our listeners out there get the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm very fond of the Naked Archaeologist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sim Jakubowicz, the Canadian-Israeli fellow.
Right.
His excavations in Israel were fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I should mention that Diana Wall later went on to do a dig, actually, in Central Park in Manhattan. So I think many of the listeners might know Central Park. It's very famous around the world. It's the world's park. And of all things, she worked for 10 years excavating there, and they found the remains of a fascinating free community, which consisted of Irish, German, and African-American people, and they were living in a village. Wow. It's called in Central Park before it was the park. So I don't want to get too far off, but I just want to mention that was another of her great achievements. And
I'm sorry, and the name of the small free community was what?
It was called Seneca Village.
Seneca.
It did not have Seneca. It did
Okay.
not have to. It was not an Indian village, but it was given that name, and for a few reasons, very interesting thing. But it was mainly known for the fact that African Americans who had been freed, which is part of our story today, managed to purchase land, have their very own property, along with all the other people there had their own property, and they lived together in this community, and it was a thriving community.
All right, well, we've got a couple more people here in the chat end of things, including, it looks like Isaac via Costa Rica. Within the vacuum is what he goes by typically, and a Korean viewer. Interestingly, we don't find too many of these folks who have their Korean names running in conjunction with their profiles. It's good to see that we're managing to make strides in that direction on that front. However, so good stuff. I think it is pronounced Yuja. What they've told us here is, maybe if I had my other set of glasses on, I'd be able to see this more clearly. But Mago, now Ma is it's a root cognate of so much in both in English, Korean, and Sanskrit. So I was just talking with my adult students about this the other day. I think it's pretty straightforward how with Sanskrit, seen as one of the oldest, if not the number one oldest languages in the world, apparently, that there was influence that went westward and helped to contribute to English. And then there was an Eastern tradition as well. So that's why we see so much here in Korea, where if you look closely and start to pick things apart, dissect them, you'll find these parallels. So Ma, as in magic or make, mandalda is what they say in Korean for make. But Mago, he says, is the grandmother who created the whole world in Korean mythology, and her first letter means hemp or cannabis, and that's Ma. That's Ma in
Chinese as well. In Chinese,
right.
Dama.
Yeah,
big breath.
Dama.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, or and Dama in Korean, and so it goes. But a bit of a sidetrack once again. It's just one of the things that in drawing in the commentators via the peanut gallery and what they have to offer, sometimes we find ourselves it's a little more extra, just color commentary. But back to Daniel Tompkins now, full focus, and all the rest of our energy time that we have left here to offer on regarding his story. You've done a little bit of work, 2 shows from what I can tell, with Robert, and that he's posted over on his Rumble, and let's hear it then, how his early life all the way up to his role and impact in politics, War of 1812, the Freemasonic intrigue, perhaps, of which there was bound to be some, and right to his death, all within the course of about half an hour. Think you can do that? Be asking a little too much. Go ahead.
I know you're being so noble to do this when you're not feeling too well. So
not great. No.
Please just let me know whenever you need to. But I do have I have to thank you, Jeffy, because the past few months I've been discovering this story, and there were a few areas I had not looked into completely because there are many aspects to this story, and basically I hadn't looked into all of them. So since you encouraged this program, I have now looked into all of the points which I wanted to to discuss.
Good stuff.
To share.
Fleshing it all out. That's good.
Yeah. So you've kind of commissioned this.
Time for you to write a book, Jill Anon, very soon.
You've helped to bring this story to light. Let's say that. Okay. So the great thing about Daniel Tompkins is, yes, I've discovered all this as just a lay person. This is kind of like a basic level report. I didn't do a PhD in it or anything like that. And there's no biography that I could find of Daniel Tompkins. And there are just pieces of very interesting material here and there at various quality websites. For example, New York Court's website and, others which have his, I found a book that was written about his father, Jonathan Griffin Tompkins, and that was very enlightening. I just saw parts of that, what was written about that. So, I found pieces of information here and there, but the greatest part of it all is that in my neighborhood, it turns out the neighborhood that I've grown up in and lived all my life, it turns out that was an area that was very important in Tompkins' life. I'm not sure of all the reasons why, but it's a very important area in his life. So right near where I was born we have Tompkins Square Park, and we have Tompkins Square Library. So all my life, I wondered here now and then, one day I would like to find out who Tompkins was. And, so it seems that things happened all this year, which helped me in that quest, in all this past year. So basically, it turns out that he was born in 1774, as Robert said, but his family, his father and his grandfather and great-grandfather and beyond, I found them till like 1701, and that means that his family may have arrived before, most likely before 1700, and makes them one of the earliest families of all to live in the New York area, which was also one of the first areas where people created colonies. So where European governments created colonies. So this means that at the Dutch period, which began in early 1600s after Henry Hudson sailed into the Hudson River, which you can see in the picture behind us. He sailed into the Hudson, and soon after that, the Dutch West India Company, came here and tried to set up a colony. And there was a lot of bloodshed and a lot of distress because the Indians, this was a sacred place for the Indians, one of the greatest, most abundant estuaries in the world, which they had presided over very well and preserved the abundance. And it was kind of an area shared by a few different Indian groups, and because it was known to be so abundant, and so they all had developed different ways of life here. But when the Dutch came, this began a series of a lot of changes, very severe changes, and so that was that. But then the English, when the Dutch and the Spanish conflicts were resolved and England took control of the colony of New Amsterdam, which was Dutch. Peter Stuyvesant had been one of the Dutch governors, the most famous long-term governor of New Amsterdam. Turns out that his home was right in the neighborhood of the East Village where I live. And the Stuyvesants, in the succeeding generations after, they stayed there, even though the English were ruling the area. And they were associated with other families that were wealthy and had farms and later had estates. So it turns out that Tompkins' wife was from one of those families, and her name was Hannah Minthorn. So he married into this area of the East Village. And I think that that could be why our area is one that preserves his legacy by naming the park and the library after him. As you said earlier, this was the 250th anniversary of his birth in 2024. It was also the 190th anniversary of Tompkins Square Park, and it was the 120th anniversary of the library, Tompkins Square Library.
Did you say, Jill, just to jump in here briefly for clarification's sake, Anna Linthorn was his wife's name?
No, Hannah with an H.
Yeah.
Hannah Minthorn.
That sounds Scandinavian.
Yeah, it could be. I'm not sure I think
it's true.
I bet you it's Scandinavian, but we'll see. That sounds very Viking. Very Viking, yes.
Well, yeah. Well, her family was wealthy, and apparently somehow Daniel Tompkins' family was wealthy as well. So during that period, of course, as I now understand, the colonies were being supplied by England with people and with goods, and they were receiving the supplies and products which they commissioned in return. And this led eventually to the Revolutionary War. But it seems that Tompkins' family was there way before the Revolutionary War, way before. And it turns out that his father, they lived in Scarsdale, New York, which is in Westchester near the Bronx. And he had many sons. His father had many sons. Daniel was one of 7 children, and only one girl named Phoebe, and the others had very unique names from that time period. Like Elijah and Enoch, and the youngest and last child was actually named George Washington Tompkins. So you can see that his father and mother, had some feelings about strong feelings about the creation of a country which was evolving from the colonies and provinces, which is how things tended to go. And I know that the colonies were close, a branch of the companies that were serving the kings and queens. I believe that Canada has a similar history. Isn't that so, Jaffe?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. The Hudson Bay Company would be the place to start in that search, for definitely. What would it be via New York and Manhattan? Would it be the Dutch East India Company or West India Company?
Yeah, exactly. The Dutch company was first, and then we had the
British.
The English, the British took on from there. And of course, New York was, as you can see, it's Manhattan, and it's completely surrounded by water, and the Atlantic Ocean is right there. So basically, if you can imagine, in those days, everything was just filled with ships, with sailing ships.
Sure.
With sail, and things happening at all the ports, and this was incredibly important, the commerce. going on, and apparently many other countries were involved in it as well. This was what was happening here was involving all of Europe. So that's the way things were for a while before the Revolutionary War. So basically, I just tell you about his father for a moment, because it's amazing. You see, there's a very famous Governor Morris from New Jersey, and the Westchester area were very close with New Jersey, and Jonathan Griffin Tompkins' father, his father Daniel Tompkins, actually started off working for the governor, and Governor Morris, and helping to elect delegates. There was something called the Westchester County Committee, and he helped send delegates to what was at that time called the Provincial Congress, because there was not United States at that time. And then during the Revolutionary War, his father, who was too old to serve as a soldier at that time, served as something called an adjutant to a general. So he did the managerial work for the general, working with the soldiers and helping them. And it's really interesting that Tompkins, that was the central themes of Tompkins' life, because he really, he actually became the governor of New York. That was seems to be what he wished to do the most, as you'll see. And he then, he rose to his greatest effort during the War of 1812, again, attending to the soldiers and their basic needs of clothing and ammunition and so forth. So it's really amazing that his father's interests were so closely followed in his own life.
So
and
he'd already attended law school by this point, and presumably. And when did he become a Freemason?
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to confuse you, because I was talking about Daniel Tompkins' father.
Yes.
As a precursor to Daniel Tompkins' life.
Right.
Because I was talking, everything I just said was about his father.
Right.
And showing connection.
Right.
And his father also served as a judge for many years, and Daniel first began in law as well.
Right.
Daniel Tompkins' father was self-educated, and it was his dream to send Daniel to Columbia University, which was just getting started at that time. And his father was very interested in the educational system and became a trustee, and the regents, and they wanted to make it American school as opposed to run by the king.
Right.
So his father was involved in that effort. And so basically, just to let you know, just as Daniel Tompkins was being born, his father was working intensely, under this general during the Revolutionary War. So, and was actually in the room, because when they first, it was not yet a state constitutional convention, but it was a convention in which they adopted the Revolutionary War Declaration of Independence.
Is this 1774? What year are we looking at?
Yeah, when they actually adopted that declaration, I think it was 1776, but I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then his father was in the room when they first created the Assembly for New York State. So his father made these things, and then Daniel became part of them.
Sure.
It's just a very, very interesting story.
The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, as they say.
Exactly.
So he had what it took, the right stuff, I guess, right? So,
exactly. So this was the atmosphere that Daniel was growing up in. And many people may not be aware, but the Revolutionary War ended in 1781.
Huh.
It was quite a while. And then in 1783, there was something called the Treaty of Paris.
Right.
And that is when they really firmed things up and said this is really a country and has states. And, we are going to do things in a new way. And so in Belgium, in Massachusetts, the people at that very moment, they declared that Massachusetts was not going to have slaves. It was in their own constitution in Massachusetts, they declared that. But other states were involved in a process, like a slow process.
Yeah.
So this becomes important later.
Abolition, or early days of abolition.
But yes, they were always aware that this was something that needed attention, but how to do it, that was the challenge. And so basically, this was the atmosphere that Daniel was growing in his very early years. And so then he was accepted at Columbia, and he graduated, of all things, as a valedictorian.
Oh.
So he realized his father's dream. And in 1795, at age 21, he graduated as valedictorian. While he was in Columbia, he met a man who was from Scotland and was visiting there as an instructor in law, and his name was also Munro. And as you would do it at those times, you had to apprentice after school in a firm. So Daniel apprenticed in this man's firm.
Yeah.
And then took the bar examinations and became a lawyer, and passed and became a lawyer in the city, in New York City. And of all things, so let's just say, as soon as he graduated and became a lawyer, of all things, one of the first things that happened was a very, very wealthy man, had to release his, wanted to make his will, and he called two lawyers to do that, and the two lawyers he happened to call were Daniel Tompkins and Alexander Hamilton.
Oh, how about that? Hamilton was seen as a real traitor in the eyes of many, from as memory serves. Like he was a tool for the elite banking system, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but in this particular case, he seems to have done a very good thing. Okay. According to the story, he asked the man, how did you earn your big fortune? Did you do it through piracy?
Ah. Well, let's hope so.
So he said, no, it was by good means. And so then he said, well, you earned it from the trade, from the sea, from the sea. So why don't you give the money in your will back to the sea? And he said, okay, I'd like to leave it to make a home for elderly and ailing sailors.
Oh, that's great. That was Hamilton?
Yeah, Hamilton encouraged the man to do this, and the man came up with this idea.
There's Tompkins right now for anyone that's interested. That's, I believe, who we're looking at with the slideshow.
Yeah.
One of the few pictures of him we managed to track down.
Oh, yeah, there are several in the ones I sent you. We have a few, like 5, that are good, and there aren't too many. But basically, so that eventually became something very important in Staten Island, in New York City. This is called Snug Harbor Cultural Center. That Jacqueline Onassis Kennedy, she helped to save it in 1995, and now it's permanent. It's as permanent as things can be, part of the city. It's a very remarkable area. It has Gothic Revival architecture, the largest concentration of Gothic Revival architecture. And it's really like going back in time. It's very beautiful, and it's a thriving cultural center now.
Did you say snug or snog?
Snug.
Yeah, because, snog for the Brits, that would be a big draw, I'm sure. They would all want to come check that one out. If anyone out there knows what it means in British slang to snog, you'd want to,
right.
That's slang for making out, basically, folks.
Okay, right. It's snug harbor.
Yeah.
Snug harbor.
But close enough, isn't it? When you snuggle, you kind of get around to snogging, usually.
That's true. And then we have in 1798 was his year of his marriage. So that was 3 years after his graduation, and he become a lawyer. And then he also did other jobs as a commissioner of bankruptcy, of all things. All these themes tend to be a few themes that are really important in his life, right. And they're all here. And then in 1800, his first child was born, his first of 8 children, and he adopted a son, and Wood was the 9th child, and his father had also adopted a son too. So anyhow, then we have 1801 was such an important year in his life because he was invited to serve as a delegate to the real New York State Constitutional Convention, the first one, and then he also became initiated into the Masonic Order that year.
That was 1810?
1801.
01, okay.
Yeah, so that was the Scottish Rite Masonic Order, and it's interesting because we saw his coat of arms, and it has like a unicorn on it, and peacocks, and 3 what looks like crosses. So it's very unique coat of arms.
Very elaborate.
Very unique, and very it's not at all warlike looking. And to have a unicorn and so forth. And so it was one that was associated, I think, with the Scottish Templars. And very interesting. I don't know much more than that, except that 1801 he was initiated, and then he did remain incredibly important part of his life, his whole life, which wasn't a very long life, only till 50 years old. He was a very important part of the order in different ways. So,
do you know what degree he managed to rise?
Yes, I do. In 1813, he came to the 33rd degree. And then in 1820. He became the Grand Master of the New York Masonic Order. And he did that for 2 years in 1820.
Worshipful Master, let's not forget. But we're told it's not a religion, right? It's like, whatever the case, he sounds like he was a man of some integrity, adopting a child, and just endless community service, obviously. So let's hear more of what you've got to offer here before we.
Okay.
This is very. I'm very much captivated.
Yeah. Yes. As long as you can bear. So here it has. So basically, there is. Again, I didn't know him. I wasn't there, and I don't know. But there is what seems to be a very clear picture of someone with a lot of compassion. It seems that way, and you'll see why I say that. Okay, so then, and he was also involved in churches.
Right.
He was part of very close with. He was a congregant in the Dutch Reformed Church in Staten Island, and very close friends with apparently an extraordinary minister of the time whose name was Van Pelt. So he was very close friends with him on Staten Island. So again, I don't know, all the details of his innermost beliefs. But anyhow, okay. So then he was elected to the New York State Assembly in 1803. But he did that for a short while, and then he was put to the House of Representatives, but he declined to do that, and he decided that he wanted to become an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, and he did that for 3 years, 1804 to 1807. As I say, ever from 1801 on, he was in continuous, there was never a break. He was always in an office doing something very difficult. So he did that from 1801 till 1825 when his life was completed. So basically, after he was the Associate Justice of New York Supreme Court, he authored more than 20 decisions. So he was very active. It was not something that he was just taking, having a pleasant time. He was working very hard and worked on many important decisions that required a lot of work. And then he decided to run for governor, and in 1807. Now, in New York State, there had been a governor who took all records. Like, he was the first governor. His name was George Clinton, and he was the first, and he kept coming back. He would take a little break, then become governor again, then become governor again. So I think that Tompkins had that example in his mind, because he did that as well, like throughout his life. He loved being the governor. And so basically he ran in 1807, and his party was Democratic Republican.
They were called Democrat Republicans?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I know.
So it was a state party, not a federal party.
No, actually, it was a federal party as well.
Okay, all right.
Excuse me. You're so right. Excuse me. I shouldn't have said that for state. Yeah, but that was the national party. Mm-hmm. That was his leaning. And there was the opposite of that at that time was Federalist. So even though George Washington was Federalist, and everyone did appreciate George Washington, as time went on, they started to become more towards, a certain group became more towards Jefferson and Madison, who had a different vision for the country. They didn't want a strong central government. So apparently New England was strongly Federalist, and the Southerners were more Democrat Republican, like Thomas Jefferson in Virginia. And Westerners were also Democrat Republican. They were interested in building a republic. So this was the tension that was going, or the dynamic that was going on at the time. So this became more intensified during the War of 1812, because there was this issue over trade, and England was upset that if with France, we shouldn't have trade with France, and because they were having a war with Napoleon and all this. So basically, the Democrat Republicans were also a little more French leaning.
Huh.
So this was very interesting dynamic, and of course, you being very close with Canadian history, you may know that apparently this War of 1812 a lot of it was fought in Canada, or it started in Canada.
Yeah, I need to study more. It's a fascinating history. There's no doubt about that. There's so much to be said. It's one of the reasons why, as memory serves, the French, Québécois, even to this day, their license plate reads "Je me souviens," which Robert will know, maybe even you. I'm not sure how. Yeah, I remember. That's right. And that had to do with the, I think, but actually that goes back to 1759, as from what I recall, the battle, the Plains of Abraham.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that was the date. So, but yeah, War of 18. I was going to ask you about the French Indian Wars, that and the fact of what did Jefferson warn us of? To beware of any extensive international entangling in alliances. You know, this is the stuff that gets us into trouble, right? That's
that was George Washington. Yeah.
Well, Washington said that? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and what about the French Indian Wars then? When was that? What are we looking at as time frame there? That was before all of this? Yes?
1765.
Yeah, before the revolution.
That drew in Canada as well, or what was then known as upper Canada, which I think it was called Upper Canada or Upper Ontario? Either way.
Ontario.
It was called Upper Ontario?
Well, I was just reading about that, so I have to, but I think it was Ontario, as I remember.
Okay. You know,
and it was interesting that you mentioned that, because apparently one of the first things the Americans did during that war was to burn the government buildings in Ontario.
I'm sorry, who the French did that?
During the War of 1812.
Yes.
Yeah, the French, the American side, whoever was that, what consisted of the French or whoever, burned those buildings, and that's why later in the war, the British, burnt Washington D.C.
So that was revenge, was it?
It was revenge.
I didn't know that. Okay, how about that?
They said it was revenge.
Oh well, there you, of course, you tit for tat. That's what happens.
It was kind of revenge, because that was, that was there. And so they burned the Capitol building and the White House. What was the White House at that time?
Right.
The British did in 1812.
Well, let me just put the brakes on things here for the moment, because I want to bring someone into the conversation. She probably isn't going to do a lot of talking, but she's been here eavesdropping. She's been in the comment section as well. And we've got Jethro popping up here as well, asking, did the IRA field an army in the War of 1812? So maybe Jethro is out of Ireland, perhaps, or has Irish ancestry, but wondering, I didn't even know the IRA existed. Their roots, the Orange Order, William of Orange, there may be a connection on that.
Those are the Protestants.
Yeah, but I don't know about that. It's possible.
Oh, well, that's something more you'd have to look into then, I guess. But Sonia Galactic out of Phoenix, Arizona, if she wants to drop in and say hi. Do you have any questions so far, Sonia? Maybe a few items we're missing out on, and we don't want to overextend things here too much. We did agree to a 2-hour time frame. We got off to about, it was half an hour late already when we got the ball rolling here. So, but I do want to hear as much as we can from Jill as well to finish up. I can't believe he only lived to be 50. We got to find out about his death, obviously. Go ahead, Sonia.
Hi, nice to meet you. Absolutely. Yes, I'm getting a history lesson over here.
You want to come on camera?
Yeah.
I'm right now.
You do.
But very interesting stuff. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. I really don't know too much about the whole history thing, but I know a lot more now. Yeah. Thanks.
Wonderful. That's our hope. I know. Wonderful. Well, it gets more interesting. So.
Maybe we could have you back for a part 2 at some point, potentially, if necessary. So
I don't want to keep too much here.
Oh no, but I don't want to tie you and Robert up, because he said 2 hours, and I understand. He doesn't sound.
Oh, no. We're okay as long as you're okay. I'm really concerned that you're okay. 40. So just whenever you want to conclude, let me know. And but there's a few more interesting parts here.
Okay. So let's hear.
So then, okay. So basically, at one point the British remember 1807. Tompkins is now the governor of New York State, and New York State extends way up close to Canada there. It's really
well, we're contiguous.
Contiguous, actually. A little part of it touches Canada practically. So it's because there was so much action going on around there in the War of 1812. So at one point, Buffalo, New York, was attacked very severely by the British, and it was very bad attack, very devastating, and so it was a surprise as well. So this may have been what motivated Tompkins as the governor to then work strenuously to create the state militias. And now, in those days, the new country, United States, was already not doing well financially at all since the Revolutionary War. It had barely recovered from the Revolutionary War. So banks were hesitating to give loans to the governments of the states. They didn't really want to do that. So basically, the way things worked, that they asked people to pay for their own clothing and their own guns and send the bill to the government and know that at some point they would be reimbursed. And so this is amazing, but people during the War of 1812, at least in New York State, had to do it that way. So, of course, this was very, quite a lot to ask of people, to be not only to have them fight, but also to have them pay for their own guns and their own supplies and clothing. So this is what Tompkins was faced with as a governor. And then England was still busy with Napoleon, so they were kind of tied up. But after they finally got an end to that they were able to send more troops and ships and fighting forces of all kinds, to America to fight whatever they want to fight. So basically, they started to go to all the ports as well. All the ports, of course, that was what they were accustomed to, and conduct raids, coming into the different ports. And they were quite successful with that because they had lost some battles to the Americans, but they were doing quite well raiding ports and causing other difficulties, kind of blockading ports from supplies, which is a very serious issue. So the people couldn't receive supplies, and food and commerce was caught, at a standstill. So Tompkins had all these problems to work on as governor. They needed a militias, and there were a couple of battles they had to fight in New York. There was one major battle which the Americans did win, and they had to be ready at other parts in New York State. And then there were other famous battles. The War of 1812 is the one that we get the Star-Spangled Banner from. That was the source of the Star-Spangled Banner, was the War of 1812. So Tompkins was involved in all of this, especially in 1814 was the crucial year. The British were really doing a lot of things that I just described, all of them at once. And so Tompkins, being the governor of New York, I think he was instrumental, very likely, in having the government come to New York City to take refuge, because the Congress took refuge in New York City when the British burned the Capitol. So since he was the governor, he was very well likely involved in that process. Then he had to secure the ports because, the ports and the water. We're all water here. And apparently he managed to do this successfully because New York City was never subjected to the things the other people were subjected to. And one way he did this was to build forts. So he helped in the building of forts. And one fort was called Fort Richmond. The other was called Fort Tompkins. And they were in Staten Island, and they protected the waterways. And of all things, at the same time, he came to know a young man by the name of all things, Cornelius Vanderbilt. So he was actually a mentor of Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt, is this the what you would call the scion or the founder of the whole Vanderbilt dynasty? Is that right? An empire? Yeah.
That's right. That's the one.
Okay.
But he knew him as a young man, and Vanderbilt was not born into a wealthy family.
Right.
So Tompkins encouraged him somehow helped him get a grant, either with Tompkins' own money or Vanderbilt's own money. Maybe after this we can step back and do a part 2 next time.
Sure.
Because it's such a long story. But
people are really enjoying this, by the way. We're getting a lot of great comments here via the Peanut Gallery. Joshua Huckle is really very much drawn in and blown away by a lot of what you're unpacking. So just continue and right up to the point of his death, I suppose, capping off his life and his legacy.
Yeah, just the War of 1812 is there's a little more.
Okay.
So Cornelius Vanderbilt, he enabled him to get a grant to create ships that were needed. So to help also to guard the harbor and do supplies. And Cornelius, even though he was quite young, he did really well at it, and he succeeded and actually was responsible for a very important ship that went down to New Orleans to do the last battle in the War of 1812.
That was not necessary. Did you know that? Apparently, that they did not have to fight that battle. It was because communication was so slow back in the day that there'd already been a truce had already been called to the War of 1812.
Exactly.
But they didn't know.
So it wasn't, but apparently that was a very famous battle, and one of those ships of Cornelius Vanderbilt was really essential in the victory that happened. So Tompkins was involved in that as well. And he had to also create a means of getting supplies from Staten Island to Manhattan and vice versa. So he started the first steamboat service, which became, as Robert mentioned, the Staten Island Ferry.
Oh, that's right.
Later. But at that time it was a steamboat, and of all things, can you remember who just a few years before had shown the first steamboat? Was Robert Fulton.
Okay.
Right on.
So
right on the Hudson.
He was, they were living in that same time, and Tompkins apparently knew him, or in some way was able to participate in having that steamboat and in Staten Island and Manhattan. So I mean, it's really an interesting moment in time that he was right there with these two very important people as well. And in addition, so these are all things he was doing during that war to ensure the harbor and basically protecting the whole city. Now, because if no one could get in you can see behind me, right, where they would enter in to get into the city by the water. So Tompkins Fort was right at the end of where you can see Staten Island, I think, in the distance there. So they were protecting that. And if you come further along the shoreline, in towards Manhattan, you will get to where Peter Stuyvesant's area was. And that area was an important kind of a harbor type, was kind of protected, and an excellent place to dock. And I think that's maybe where of the government area was, because I've actually seen a building there which says U.S. Senate, and whether that was actually there or whether it was built over the place where the Senate had seat, I don't know, but it's possible that the Senate may have taken refuge there. That would make some sense because Tompkins Square Park is right by that area, and many of these squares were used to train troops, to train regular people, of course, who were willing to try to fight, and Tompkins, looked after that their training as well, and he at one point was given the title of commander. So, as far as I know, there are that is when they call, it's very possible that this Tompkins Square became either in that very area or near it, became Tompkins Square Park. And, and of course that was near his wife's family as well, and it's right near the church where he's buried. So somehow or other, the East Village was very important. These are just my thoughts as to the fact that he may have conducted training in this area to protect the government and protect this area that was his wife's family's area. And also across the river, when you head, from the East Manhattan to Brooklyn, directly across from the 14th Street area, there's Brooklyn. And right in that part of Brooklyn, of all things, there's a Tompkins Avenue. So, and his avenue is along with all other presidents. A few of the earliest presidents' names are also on those original streets that were laid in that area.
He was two-time vice president.
Yes, he was, and he was even nominated for president at a certain point, I learned. So anyhow, so this area plus Staten Island seemed to be the crucial areas that he worked on during that War of 1812. And it was victorious. In the process, he also laid out a turnpike in Staten Island, which was also probably due to the war effort, because it's now called Victory Boulevard, and it's one of the most important boulevards in, traffic area lanes or, roads in Staten Island. So, okay, so then so that was basically all the things that he did during the War of 1812. Sad part was that the war probably never had to start, and apparently Russia offered to mediate it immediately when the conflict or divisions broke out. So, but anyhow, the communication, as you said, was so hard in those days, so it just didn't work out. But the treaty that was signed eventually, it did create, it was the last time England and America had a war on the battlefield, So after that, they agreed to respect one another. The problems that were occurring with trade and the ships and the seas, subsided somewhat on their own. But it was an extremely important war because it became the basis for part of Canada's history. Like Canada started to, it really contributed to some of the Canadian identity because some of the loyalists, then went on. They let go the support they were giving for the Indians against the westward expansion. So that was a real change, and then we had Andrew Jackson coming after that. So the Indians really, it was a turning point for, we like to say Native Americans. At that time, it was a very important for them, and for all of us in that sense, unfortunate.
even just a little later on down the road, probably I guess after Tompkins had passed away. But speaking of natives and westward expansion and their role throughout the Canadian West, Louis Riel and the Red River Uprising. Actually, there were several of them. So, and he was quite a character too. He was really quite a rogue and a rebel. But so definitely check out his story if you get an opportunity, folks. Louis Riel.
Great.
All right.
So I think I may be able to complete it not too much longer.
Okay.
Just to let you know that
I want to hear about his vice presidency, the 2 terms as vice president.
Yeah. So actually, so that was basically the War of 1812, but he really was in battle situations at times in New York State. I believe New York City, as far as I know, did not experience any direct battles, but they did have to defend, and that was very hard work. And towards the end of 1814, he fell off his horse, and very severe injury that he could never get over for the rest of his life, and it was very painful. So that was sad.
Was it to his spine?
Yeah, I think it must have been his spine. I don't know the details, but most likely his spine and some hip or so. And so basically, he had actually, he had the money at that point before the war. He had the money, which apparently in today's money was more than $2 million to at least, and he used that money himself, as I described, to purchase guns, etc., clothing, etc., for the soldiers, and do these other fortifications and the boats and everything. But at a certain point, even that vast sum, ran out.
Sure.
And so he literally financed the war in New York State himself, and very little other help that I'm aware of. And he then had to ask for loans to banks. And the banks would, they didn't want to give the loan to the government because the government they knew was broke, but they knew that Tompkins put his own property as collateral for the loan. So that was a sound loan from their point of view. So, but in other words, he put his own property as for the loans.
That's wild.
So, yeah, it's really wild. And then and then there was a sense of victory, at the end of it, even though it was a very unusual war. And so Americans did have a sense of victory, and they did have a little more sense that they wanted to be their own place and all that. But then, Tompkins had the hardest time getting back any of the money that he had given. And even though that was the agreement that the government had given the people. So they gave him such a hard time. And
so that's right. The government promised to reimburse after the fact, but they didn't. The government then did not hold good or true to what they promised.
Yeah, they didn't. But for one thing, they might have been still broke. But however, they also were not too nice about, too good natured about it. They were not supportive.
Yeah. Government integrity, we often find be something of an oxymoron, unfortunately. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Exactly. So anyhow, so he was really in a poor financial, it was very challenging for him after that. And it gets worse because when he became vice president for the second term, the Congress actually passed a law against him that targeted him particularly. And they said, they didn't say his name, but they said that if anyone is in debt, even though the debt was, for the country, they said even anyone in debt should not be given a salary. So they withheld his salary as vice president. And he had to go, and then he was charged in a federal court for accusations that he had somehow, misused public money, whatever they came up with. Just the same as today, they come up with things.
It's just like Trump.
I guess so, yeah.
Even someone that had done so clearly this incredible sacrifice, it was quite clear to most people, but there were always those who were, for whatever reasons, they were upset that England had lost or whatever it was, so they were just vindictive. And so he had to go through that whole process, and then even the bankers that had loaned him the money came to testify for him during the case that he was good.
Yeah.
So the bankers even came, and so he won the case eventually.
Thank God.
Took all that time. It took the whole time of his second term as vice president.
Geez, just a total waste, a drain of resources and energy and everything that he would otherwise have been able to accomplish, diverted elsewhere. So I'm reminded of the old maxim, the expression, do not let any good deed go unpunished.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
This do-gooder Tompkins, we gotta make teach him a lesson.
It's true. And, because he did have a lot of heart, he really seemed to have had it. And they want to, so we don't know all the reasons they attacked him, but that might have been one of them. And so, and also he was in a lot of pain. And in those days, you had to drink. Many people drank to get over pain.
Yeah.
So he ended up having trouble with that, being, as
Yeah.
well.
What of opium?
Yeah, I think
Laudanum.
it wasn't opium, but it was...
They call it laudanum? Laudalum?
Laudanum. Laudnum.
Laudanum.
Edgar.
Yeah,
Edgar Allan Poe.
the pirates, those of sailors of the high seas back in the day, that was a central, anytime you sustained a major injury, I guess that was quite common to find that, given to anyone suffering in extreme pain on the ship.
Exactly. But unfortunately, it was hard to conduct himself as he would like, but under that situation. But still, people had such respect for him, and he was still able to do such important things even under those circumstances.
Yeah.
And he was
incredible.
Nominated. Yeah. And so I can quickly list what he did as governor,
Sure.
other than the War of 1812, which was alone more than you could want, But as governor, he worked for something. He was very aware of the penal code and capital punishment. So he was striving there was a long list of offenses that could be result in capital punishment.
Yeah.
And he felt that he didn't feel it was good.
It was too much and excessive.
Excessive. And, he recognized something perhaps quite wrong with that. So he worked to lessen the amount of offenses. He gave land to Indians, Native Americans in New York State. And that might be why it's called Tompkins County. There's an area called Tompkins County in New York State, but he gave land specifically for Indians. I think he recognized that as also very important moral issue of the time. And then he worked for education, as his father had, supporting schools. And he also, this is the most significant part that we should think about. he worked for the end of slavery. So in his last year as governor, he tried so hard to get this passed. It was called the New York Abolition Act, Abolition Act of New York State. And the abolition movement, as I said, it was active in several of the states that didn't, the northern states. And they were trying to figure out how to do it. In Tompkins, they were doing it by degrees and changing titles from slaves to servants and other things they were trying to do. But Tompkins really laid out a comprehensive details for this, how they could be done. And he gave it to the Congress for the act, and they did pass it. And he was the one who set the date that 1827, after 1827, slavery as it had been practiced, would no longer be done any longer. So he didn't live to see that day, but he did do that, and he was apparently the main force for it. He really worked at it really hard, and I don't know who his other supporters were. I don't know if he had interactions with African American leaders at the time, or exactly the details of how he worked this all out. But I know that he was very, very committed to it.
And they were not even able to vote at that time, the black people, were they?
No. No.
So he wasn't, I don't think he was doing it for the votes, necessarily.
Exactly right. He wasn't doing it for the votes, and he was also, it was unpopular, of course, with some people as well. It was clearly, some kind of moral stand that he seemed like a through line with the other things he had done. It does indicate to me some form of caring for people, and
wow.
As well as other visions that he may have had.
Yeah.
But
what is it? The Bill of Rights, or is it the Constitution? All men are created free and equal. I mean, two things. Does that include women? And does that include black people are not people or men? Like they are human. Like
that was one of the problems in the early constitutional period,
right?
Because there were so many slaves in the South, and this is what led to that vote that the population in the Congress, the number of congressmen is determined by the population of state, and they didn't want to include slaves, but as part of the populace. So the southern states felt that they were getting gypped out of representation. So they finally came up with the 3/5 solution. They would count proportionally. They could count the population of black people proportionately to establish representation in Congress. I did want to say that one of the most important things that Tompkins did was serve as vice president under James Monroe. And as a result, he had to have had a lot of input into the Monroe Doctrine, which is that we would stand against any European nation that would start to invade any American country. And that has been a policy for a very long time here. It's known as the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah,
so
sphere of influence. And what about 54-40 or fight? That's James Polk, was it not?
Yeah, yes, that's later on.
Well, we'll Polk you.
Okay. Jill has a bit more.
Okay.
To finish up, and I want to ask you, Jaffe.
Yeah.
I think it would be great to end the program with a very special song, especially related to these events, and that would be Johnny Horton's Battle of New Orleans. It'll tell the whole story.
Sure.
In a couple of minutes, I think it would be a great way to end the program.
Yeah.
When we come to an end. Jill still has something.
Okay.
Again, we can cut at any point. I can, but I just have so.
And let's we'll have Sonia chime in, and then if there's any final comments, questions, or like via the peanut gallery, there is one that's unrelated. I'll save that for the end too. Don't let me forget. It has to do with you, Jill, being tied in somehow to Heidi Hollis and the shadow people phenomenon. I don't know if this is true or not, but that's what we're hearing. So
I don't know about that, but anyway, I don't know.
Maybe another. Joshua's thinking of another Jill, I guess, is what it is. So.
Maybe, most likely. I don't know anything about that.
Well, we have shadow people here.
But anyhow, yeah. So basically, the most intriguing part, you won't believe, Jeffrey, is that in this church, St. Mark's Church, where Tompkins is buried, it happens that I found a notation, I have to confirm it, but that Peter Stuyvesant, the original Peter Stuyvesant, asked that his slaves be buried with his family in the churchyard that he had for his family. So that was in his will, as I understand. And this was important because in those days, the slaves did not have a good burial places. They were just put in any area without any real.
They have found mass graves.
They call it Potter's Fields.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And in New York City, we have certain areas we have now found where this has occurred.
Yeah. Were you actively involved in that with your archegological digs and recovery?
Actually, I was.
Okay.
Yeah, you're so right. Exactly.
Okay.
So then in St. Mark's Church, it has a little graveyard there, and the church, it has another section. It has a front area with the graves where Daniel Tompkins is buried with his wife and his wife's family. And it says on the grave, sacred to the memory of Mangel Minthorn, who was his wife Hannah's father. And so it says that there. And however, on the other side of the church, on the west side, there's another open area with some trees, and there are mounds there. And I'm just wondering if perhaps there might be, those mounds might be the burial site of some slaves. Because it's very unusual to have mounds like that, at the church.
You find that here in Korea all the time. They're called mu tom. And if you look at that word a little closely, mu and tom, the mu might be as an opsum mu, like mu, nothing, and tom, tomb. So there's it's another, it's like something very interesting happening etymologically as far as the connection between Korean and English. But the rounded burial mounds, yes, yeah. And the big ones they would have for the kings or really wealthy people, but the kings usually the really giant ones, yeah. And we found they're all across Europe too, as well.
Yeah, Silbury Hill, as a matter of fact, in England, Silbury Hill, a very magical place. That's where King Sil was buried.
Oh yeah,
and it's a wedding cake made of crystals that was then filled in with earth to make this beautiful, beautiful mound. I was up there twice and did Tai Chi on top. I actually shot a video there called "The Fool on the Hill," go with the song by the Beatles.
Yeah.
Cool.
So this is like something that has never been discussed in our neighborhood, but I think that there's maybe a lot to the story of why there are mounds there. And in that, so if it's possible that there are slaves there, it's fascinating because Tompkins, there's a statue of Tompkins in that very park, a beautiful statue, just of his bust, but then it has a base which has metal plaque in which is engraved letters describing things, highlights in his life.
I think we got that in the slideshow, actually, that bust you're talking about.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
and so that's the thing where, great slideshow, by the way. And so basically, Tompkins, the fact that of all things he might be in the section, honored in the section with the slaves. This is just my thought. I don't know, but it's very moving. And
did he own any slaves or house servants of any kind, or or what? Are you up to speed on that?
Yeah, I haven't. I don't know, but it's a great question because this leads to the other part where we're coming closer to the end. When he was in Staten Island, he came to Staten Island to live in 1814. And of course, that was the same year that the war was ending. So there was something called a quarantine building there. It has a name exactly, but quarantine. And basically, that quarantine building was used to take people who were very sick. And many immigrants came there, soldiers came there to be attended to, and it was in need of a lot of, support. And for some reason, Tompkins and his wife decided that would be a good place for them to make their home. So they bought many acres all around that quarantine building. And so in doing so, they managed to create a little village, and they were able to support the activities of that quarantine center. And in making the village, they laid out streets, and they supported 3 churches, Dutch Reformed churches in the area that were all attended to by this Reverend Van Pelt. And they basically created a support system for this very important building, which was the only one at the time that attended to all these sick people.
Basically,
I also find that almost too much to fathom, that they would do that, but apparently he did, and I don't really know what to say, but I think it seems like an extremely charitable act and caring act. And in 1818, there was a terrible cholera epidemic, a very, very severe one, a terrible one. And people were brought there, and, people were ministers were, Tompkins made sure that they had services and so on. So I don't know, but it was very, very interesting. So basically, the last thing I just want to mention that he did as governor was to actually fight the banks, the negative banking interests that were trying to work against the people in different ways. And he actually was the only governor in New York history that used a certain technique called proroguing the bank to deter the formation of a certain bank that would have had, he felt, negative effect on the country and the state and the people there. So he was aware of many, many things.
It sounds like, Jill, at that point in time in his career, he and Alexander Hamilton had grown in separate directions, philosophically. Because yes, Alexander Hamilton, was he not the one who was most notorious for selling America out or trying to do all he could to undermine the people's interest to hand as much power over to the banks as possible?
I think that's a slander from the north of the border. Alexander Hamilton is responsible for the great industrial success of the United States of America. He established Wall Street. Maybe that's what you're talking about. But without investors, there would have been no business and no industry in the United States. So let's course correct that one, please. I like Alexander Hamilton.
Private bank. I think it was private banks. I have to look.
Central banking.
Central banking, yeah.
Jill was talking about.
And but
heavy interest.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think they were definitely on different ends of belief in certain areas, and the 1801 collaboration was early on, so
sure.
That was. But basically that was that one. So I'm so glad. So when he became, he actually wanted to be governor. He wanted to run for president. He was asked to run for president at the end of his 1817 term as governor, and he tried. Even he did give some effort to it, but it ended up that James Monroe asked him to be his running mate, and be vice president. So that's how that turned out.
Oh, he was in a lot of pain at that point in his life anyways, wasn't he? He's really struggling with health issues. So
he really was, but he still came so dedicated to the public service unceasingly, for some reason, as well as that a whole village was being created in his home, and his wife was looking after it all, and with many children and so on. So it's just quite a story.
Were they successful? How did they fare over the course of their lives? They had 8 children, you said. Is that right?
Yes, 8 children, and a child basically every 2 years.
Yeah.
Starting in, they starting in 1800, ending in 1814, they had a child regularly, and then they named all their children after their parents, and then
Bible characters.
No Bible characters, but
I thought you said Elijah and Enoch. Was it?
Yeah,
was that the father? Grandpa.
That was his father.
Yeah.
Those were his brothers.
Okay.
Yeah, and but his children, he named 4 of them after each parent's mother and father, and they named one child. Each one had a child named after Hannah. One was Hannah. One was Daniel. And then there was a couple of other names, but pretty much that took care of it.
So he almost how did he die?
Yes,
he's dying now.
Yes.
Was it sudden?
Well, it wasn't that sudden because he was in very much pain, and his health was not good because of the pain. And so basically it was nothing happened to him, a foul will or ill will that I'm aware. But he just, at the end of 1824, he really didn't, he had a hard time in Washington because, as you know, the second term was caught up with all these people attacking and so on. And so at the end of that term, though, he had thought to return to being a governor. And he did try, but he lost by a few votes only to a man named DeWitt Clinton, who's also very important in New York history. So, but only 3 months after that defeat, he died.
Yeah.
He died. So after he left office as vice president, and he had the defeat as the governor, so he died. But in that last year of his life, he was greatly honored by a visit from General Lafayette.
Oh yeah, that's a French general.
That's right. That's right. And so you could see the French leanings of the Democrat, Republican, and all.
Well, the French helped us. Lafayette trained troops in the Revolutionary War.
Right. Lafayette trained the troops in the Revolutionary War, which his father was so involved in. And so to have that in the end of his life, that tremendous honor, And this was remembered. He entertained him on Staten Island, and this was remembered by a group that celebrates Lafayette history. They honored last year, 2024 as well.
Native Indians and black people, they also served, I know, in the Civil War ranks with the blacks, big time. But the Native Indians, they were always there in one capacity or another. So maybe that had an impact in Tompkins, his mindset and his thinking, as far as making the generosity that he showed them, the breaks and deals that he cut them, with providing land, giving their land back to them, or at least a little of it, the natives, and and looking at, because I guess racism, it should have read more like what all white men are created equal. That, I guess, would have been a better place.
Actually, Kathy, there's a misconception about slavery. Slavery was not all black. At one point, there were more Irish slaves in America.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Sure.
So let's not color code. Slavery has come in all colors. As a matter of fact, the word slave comes from the word Slav.
Yeah.
Because Vikings kidnapped so many Slavic people and sold them to the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
That's how the word slave derived. So it has nothing really to do with color anymore.
Right. And blacks were selling, like Africans were selling their own people out. On the west coast of the Americas, up British Columbia, the Native Indians were selling their own people out. They were happy. We can make some money by selling them over, to a life of bondage, slavery.
Slavery is still practiced today. Slavery is still practiced today in Africa and Arabia and other areas, Asia.
Yeah.
I saw a documentary about a slave market in Libya. An American woman was there, and African women were begging her to buy them because they've heard that Americans are kind, so they wanted to be bought.
And of course, I mean, we all really are wage slaves, most of us at least, to one degree or the next, if you think about it. But it's all a matter of degrees and magnitude, I guess, how you look at things. But okay, to wrap up then, Jill, and cap things off.
Actually, wrapping up, I don't know how you did it, Jackie, but we did.
Really?
So,
okay, but how did he pass away then? Just he died peacefully in his sleep one night, or?
Yeah, I don't know the details of it, but there's nothing. As I say, I think.
No.
He did have many children. Maybe some point someone can write a biography. Who knows some of the innermost details, but as far as I know, he died rather peacefully, and his wife lived only a few years longer, 4 years longer.
Yeah.
And she died also at age 47. He died around 50.
Wow.
So, and they have both, given so much, and basically, their children did go on to be active. The child he adopted went to West Point and became involved at West Point, which was just beginning during the times of Tompkins, during the Revolutionary War, and it was developing slowly into military academy, the oldest in the country, one of the oldest.
Okay.
But to end, I'll just tell you that in 1821, which was, still vice president, he presided over the second New York State Constitutional Convention, where, again, some very important material was discussed. And it's so funny that he began, with the Constitutional Convention and ended that way, and kind of began during the Revolutionary War, and then at the very last moment of his life, to have that visit from Lafayette, it was very, it's very beautiful in a sense that those echoes in his life, how those circle was made, and I just want to read you what was written. He's honored as well by the Masons to this day. And they do that in different ways. He has a memorial chapel in upstate New York dedicated to him. and he has an award that they give for distinguished service named for him.
Sure.
And an active lodge as well that's named for him in Staten Island.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the Masons at one of the commemorations said these words, and I thought his name was R.W. George Cromwell, and he's American, but he said this about Tompkins. I thought I'd read it. As a man, he was upright, brave, and sincere. As a citizen, he was a true American, public-spirited, and active. As a public official, he was clear-headed, firm in resolve, even when his best efforts to serve the people were misconstrued and thwarted. He was indomitable in perseverance. And as a man, through all his strenuous life, he was indefatigable in advancing the interests of his brotherhood and always found time to give his best energies to his brethren. And so they said, his example is a beacon of light to our noble brotherhood throughout the land. And
Freemasons, so, they love their light.
So that was, but I think they touched on some things that.
That was a eulogy that he read for him at his funeral.
Yeah.
Oh, that was lovely. Of course, yes.
One of the commemorations.
Yeah.
And I know to finish out just that Jassy, I think you'd be particularly interested since you're a musician. But his park, Tompkins Square Park, is a very unique place, and it's been the home of many America's musical genres that have been shared with the whole world, and many of them were developed in that park. It's starting with including the Jewish American immigrants creating the musical theater tradition there, and then we had the early jazz revival people developing jazz and blues there. We had Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger there with a revival of folk music in America.
Oh, the Greenwich Village folk people came out to play there a lot?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is Greenwich Village.
They started there, and they went to the West Village. But they started in Tompkins.
Yeah, I love both those guys, Woody and Pete. I love both of them. And they're just legends, of course. So,
Exactly. And
I shook hands with Pete Seeger.
I know the story. You shared it with us. Let's hear it again. Some of the people that are with us tonight will be interested in hearing how this all played out.
Yeah.
Well, Jill convinced me that I should go to the Clearwater Festival up in New York every summer, and he was the organizer, and it was arranged to raise funds to clean up the Hudson River. So I went up there and I saw Chris Christopherson and Buffy St. Marie, and I'm waiting for a klezmer band. So I went and sat by a tree, and there was a yellow tape on the ground for the go-kart to deliver people. So my foot was about an inch from that line. And I'm looking at my foot, and this chubby guy in a golf cart comes racing by, and I'm looking at his steering, and I go, is this guy going to run my toe over?
Yeah.
And I moved my foot about 1 inch, and it went by. And then Jill says to me, Robert, it's Pete Seeger. I said, what? She said, it's Pete Seeger in the golf cart. And he had his back to me. And I said, Pete, just like that, Pete. And he turned around, he looked at me, he sized me up. Then he put out his hand, and I shook his hand. I have a big hand. He had an enormous hand.
Huh.
Yeah.
And he's the bravest man I ever saw in music. He sang a song directly at Lyndon Johnson during the Vietnam War, and he said, "We're neck deep in the big muddy, and the big fool says to keep on." And I've never forgotten that.
Did he write? Did he write that song?
I think he did.
He might have. Knee deep in the big muddy. That's quite quite a
It's
protest.
a true story. It's a true story of an army training group, a squad that was forced to cross a river by a dumbass lieutenant or a captain and forced them, and they drowned. And so he wrote that song about that incident in World War II.
Yeah, but the beautiful thing is that at that time, Pete Seeger was already more than 90. He was close to like 93 or 2 or so.
Really? Wow.
And he was together with his wife Toshi, who is was the real spirit behind the Clearwater Festival for all these many years. And she was maybe, I don't know if she was a little older than he was, but she really looked so ancient in that moment. And they were both in the cart being driven by their friend, but they were holding hands. And their hands were so old, and they were both so old. They were holding hands so closely with each other.
Yeah.
And with her last, because she died not long after that.
Right.
With her, energy, she was focusing with so much love on one of the musicians who was playing, and they were just doing that together, and it was truly an extraordinary moment.
Yeah, they were soulmates, really.
Yes, they were.
Tremendous.
And she died before Pete, and he passed away not too much longer after losing her. So, as you can imagine, total heartbreak.
And, he had a beautiful life ending too, because all his wonderful musicians that he cultivated as friends and helped in life were all with him and his family, singing his songs, around his bed, as he was dying. So it was just incredible.
That's a great way to go.
Yeah, really amazing.
You guys will have to make it to Korea here and do that for me when I kick the bucket.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, it's amazing. So Tompkins Square Park has been, a hub of this all kind of music, including Latin American music, American Latin music, and many other things have happened in that park. So
chess,
special.
As Robert pointed out earlier too, the chess masters.
Yeah, it has a basketball court that is legendary, and people come to play there, and it has, many other special things that occur there, festivals, and there are some incredibly important statues there, and so on, and many rare things in the park, but it's very community oriented. It's always been a place of activism, and also a place that is extremely spirited. Like through the whole COVID, there was plenty of singing and dancing in that park.
With or without masks?
Without, of course.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, New York rebels.
Some completely, there is an undying spirit of life in that park.
Good stuff.
And so it's just incredible. So it's very unique. And so I think it's one legacy that, if in some way it's connected to Tompkins, if somehow it shines a light on something about him, it's a very special message that goes through there.
Yeah, his spirit has left. He made an impact historically, obviously, in a way that has largely been forgotten by so many. Not necessarily the likes of yourselves, because you, Robert, and the two of you have such long time residents of the area, but outsiders, foreigners, and people who should know better. I'd never heard of him as a vice president, but I definitely will be sure to take note, and even I'd like to find what YouTube has to offer as far as deeper digging, documentaries, and that sort of thing are concerned. It might prove.
Okay, that's perfect way to end, Daphne, because once again, you have been the first. You are the first, because I do not know. I have not seen enough material. It has taken me so long to put this all together, from different websites and looking and searching. And I don't know if there's a documentary. I hope there is, but there may not be.
You know what you should do? Reach out to your local New York. I don't know, like, is Manhattan, did you say that was from like Staten Island? I'm not 100% clear on the geography because it's such a huge mega city, megatropolis, New York. But he had, his impact was, you could find it almost everywhere, I guess. A number of locations. Pressure your local, or reach out, I guess is a better way of putting it, and contact your local historical societies, media people, documentary filmmakers, and work, maybe get on top of doing something in conjunction with them, or lighting a fire just planting the idea in their heads that, hey, this is someone who's been largely overlooked up until now. His memory deserves a little bit of a revisitation and more appreciation.
I suggested the same thing today that Jill and I should take a video and go on the Staten Island ferry.
Yeah.
And show the crossing, and then tell people, start there. How did this come about?
Right. Well, there you go. That's right. Go through Tompkins Park, do a vlog, commentary. You can even do it after the fact if you want. Why don't you could interview some people on the fly?
I'll bet we could get a grant. To do this.
But the thing is, Jeffrey, I have to say, you may have broken ground here because you have presented, this information, encouraged this and supported this, and it couldn't be more important as at this anniversary time. And also at this moment in our history, in the whole world history, and to remember, certain ideals in the best that we can. We may have even more good ideals in a sense than at this time. So it's just a beautiful thing to take the time to remember and to honor and. Thank you so much.
Oh, our pleasure. And two quick things. Sonia Galactic, I'd like to invite her into the conversation, just if she's got any brief little points or questions that stand out that maybe she feels were not addressed, that we overlooked. And then finally capping it all off with, I guess, what is Johnny Horton's version of the Battle of New Orleans. So always a good song to hear. Sonia?
Yeah, that was really very interesting. I learned a lot from that. Thank you. Definitely. So I don't really have any questions or anything, but I see you've done like a lot of research on that, and that's pretty cool to bring that to the forefront. I think that also doing that vlog trip would be very interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a great point. There are actually 3 history groups in Manhattan that I know that are aware of this. They do wonderful things, really great things, and they are aware. This story is in much better hands, in their hands. But so I'm actually giving them this material so that they can then do more with it, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Follow up on what Robert and work with Robert there with what he suggested to do and how to approach it as well. Get those vlogs recorded and just whatever you think is the most reasonable approach and take it from there. So thank you once again to both of you, Robert and Jill Anon, the dynamic Manhattan duo, our power couple.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah. Do you have the Johnny Horton song queued up? Can we? You can take over the screen share. That's how.
I would have to queue it up. I thought that maybe you might find it.
You want me to track it down for you here via YouTube?
Track that down. I'll just have to adjust my camera a little bit here.
Well, while I'm doing that, why don't you just kind of take over for a moment or two? Because you don't have it available then, is what you're saying?
Well, I was suggesting that you look it up.
Oh, let people hear a little bit about the Morningstar Report, and but hopefully by that time I'll cover it.
Okay, let me just adjust this. Well, Robert Morningstar is the host with Jaffe Ryder on Mondays of the Morningstar Report, and I give world news and national news every Sunday at 3 on revolution.radio, very easy to remember. And on Sunday, I'm on Studio A. And on Mondays at 10 o'clock, Jaffe and I do an international global broadcast between Korea and Manhattan, Seoul and Manhattan. And so I encourage you to listen in. The reports are rebroadcast in Chicago, Milwaukee, and Fort Collins, Colorado, Monday through Fridays at 9 o'clock Eastern. And then you can see the visual, because the radio show, of course, is radio. But we record them all, and then they are broadcast Monday through Friday on WBOU 106.9 FM in Chicago, Fort Collins, Milwaukee. And Home Network TV is it's a website. It's a cable TV station that we've built over the last 4 years. So, and then, of course, the text reports, the magazine, the e-zine is the Morningstar Report on Substack. That's easy to find because just you type in my name, Robert Morningstar.substack.com. There we go. Oh, okay. I was hearing the song. Anyway, let's talk about the Marquis de Lafayette. Was the French general who came to the United States, and in the Revolutionary War, he helped train American troops in warfare. Because, we were a bunch of ragtag, squirrel hunters and deer hunters, and didn't have that kind of organizational mentality. So he did that, but let's not confuse him with Jean Lafitte, a man after Jaffe's own heart, pirate, who helped at the Battle of New Orleans. So now we're going to hear the Battle of New Orleans by Johnny Horton. This was a very big song when I was growing up. And so Jean Lafitte was a pirate who volunteered to help Andrew Jackson defend New Orleans. And that's the way you say it. You pronounce the E and the A, New Orleans. I happen to have been conceived in New Orleans on the Mississippi River, and I lived there as a boy. So it's very close to my heart. And Jean Lafitte was a pirate, a rogue, a wanted man. But when the Battle of New Orleans came up against the British, he and Andrew Jackson joined forces. So he was given a pardon in return for that. So he is the local hero, French hero, in New Orleans, the Battle of New Orleans. So here we go.
And yes, I think I finally did manage to get the technical end of things worked out. Let's cue it up. Even have some Korean subtitles coming your way here, folks. So cool. Battle of New Orleans, Johnny Horton, what a great songwriter that guy was. Let's sing along. If feel free, anyone out there, sing along if you can carry the tune more or less. Hopefully won't get whacked with any copyright.
In 1814 we took a little trip along the Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we caught the bloody British in a town in New Orleans. We fired our guns and the British kept coming. There wasn't as many as there was a while ago. We fired once more and they began to run on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. And we see the British come, and there must have been 100 of them beating on the drum. They stepped so high and they made the bugles ring. We stood beside our cotton bales, didn't say a thing. We fired our guns and the British kept coming. There wasn't as many as there was a while ago. We fired once more and they began to run it on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Old Hickory said we could take them by surprise if we didn't fire muskets till we looked them in the eye. We held our fire till we see their faces well, then we opened up our squirrel guns and really gave them well. We fired our guns and the British kept coming. There wasn't as many as there was a while ago. We fired once more and they began to run it on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, they ran through the briars and they ran through the brambles and they ran through the bushes where a rabbit couldn't go. They ran so fast that the hounds couldn't catch them on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. We fired our cannon till the barrel melted down, so we grabbed an alligator and we fought another round. We filled his head with cannonballs and powdered his behind, and when we touched the powder off, the gator lost his mind. We fired our guns and the British kept a-coming. There wasn't as many as there was a while ago. We fired once more and they began to run it on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, they ran through the briars and they ran through the brambles and they ran through the bushes where a rabbit couldn't go. They ran so fast that the hounds couldn't catch them on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico.
All right. Yes, well, we don't want the intro played over again. So let's just get things transitioned over to the way that we like to take care of business here with each and every outro. Turned out to be a pretty decent show, all things considered. Really great turnout via the Peanut Gallery. Lots of great comments, thoughts, input, and our two-star guests, or our featured guests, Robert and Jill Anon, definitely managed to deliver the goods. We'll have to try a few more of these double features as time goes on here. It could prove to be a pretty productive and positive way of going about bringing people on board to engage. But yeah, myself personally here, trying to do all the best I can in weathering the storm health-wise with the 24-hour flu that I have experienced time and again throughout the years. Only this time, it found itself combined with a semi-serious case of food poisoning. So we're going to have a little talk with the wife when she gets home. Usually enjoy her cooking a great deal. Partly my fault for taking seconds when I wasn't feeling all that hot in the first place. But I tell you, food poisoning on top of the flu, not a good time at all. Although once again, in connecting with our friends from all around the world, as you do, essentially vote with your computer mice and reach out to us here to become part of the conversation. It really helps to lift my spirits, especially in as lousy a state as I happen to find myself this week, health-wise. That being said, I think the next time you'll hear from us is the same time, essentially Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 on the East Coast. For you fellow New Yorkers, people who call Miami and Montreal home, that'll be Wednesday here via the Tokyo and Seoul time zone, 1 p.m. in the afternoon. On behalf of Captain Long John Sinclair and all the rest of the crew down here in Skullport Harbor, until we meet again via these high, often all too intrepid digital seas, I'm your host, as always, the Robin Hood's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder, reminding you ear to the ground, eyes to the sky. Tally-ho!
I know. There we be. Having carefully looked over each of our navigation panel instruments, checking every level, switch, dial, cable, knob, and pulley, by all accounts and indications, we indeed see it's time, once again, to drop anchor inside Mystic Bay. Draw an end to yet another week of World Pirate Radio Live. Remember, if you're looking for a little more animated online action, keep in mind we've likely got yet another great free-flowing Rogues Gallery after show coming up for the next hour in one of our more premium exclusive and remote digital underground online pirate hideaways. Also, if you yourself have a new, novel, intriguing, or otherwise underreported idea, unique individual, or pressing item in mind, be sure to either drop us a line directly over on WPRPN.com or fire us a quick email via PirateOneRadio@ProtonMail.com. We're always open to exploring fresh creative suggestions, intriguing guest ideas, cutting-edge discussion topics, and captivating themes. Remember, WPRPN.com member site subdomain links are also always available. Great for artists, musicians, podcasters, bloggers, social media personalities, or pretty much just any old land lover looking to boost their online visibility, presence, and reach. Basic personal profile accounts can be launched for just $60 per year. Staking your claim now helps not only strengthen you and the network, we're also looking out for the little guy. That's right, folks. As much as half of all WPRPN's profits are redirected right back into the hands of the people who really need it most. Community charity. After all, we are the Robin Hood. You can further embark on your own personal pirate journey by either liking, sharing, commenting on, subscribing to, or just following us via virtually any mainstream social media platform, including Twitter, Facebook, Gab, or Minds.com. So don't forget to become engaged. Until we meet again out on the high digital seas. I'm your host as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tally-ho.